"You'll never find us." That was the last message I ever got from her. No explanation, no warning, just 6 words that hit harder than any explosion I'd ever survived. I was stationed halfway across the world, sand in my boots, rifle on my back, and the dry hum of tension vibrating through the outpost, the kind of place where emotions go to die. And right there, in the middle of that lifeless silence, her text lit up my screen like a detonation. She was gone. So were our kids. And every dollar we had saved. She didn't file for divorce, she didn't call, she vanished with everything. She emptied our accounts, took the kids, sold the house, and disappeared while I was deployed overseas. I stared at the screen. The blinking cursor under her words looked like it was mocking me. "You'll never find us." I didn't scream, didn't break anything, didn't even blink. I just turned off the phone, slipped it into the chest pocket of my uniform, and walked back into the desert sun like nothing had happened. But something had. You see, she thought I'd fall apart. She thought she'd taken everything. What she didn't know was what I had kept hidden. This wasn't about heartbreak. This was about something far more calculated. My heart wasn't shattered. It was shelved. Because the only thing louder than betrayal is strategy. And here's the thing. She didn't just break my trust. She committed a crime, and that changed everything. She thought I was too far, too distracted, too loyal to react. But while she was running, I was remembering. While she was hiding, I was watching. Every document I ever signed, every login she ever used, every story that didn't quite add up, they all came back. I had learned in combat. The first one to panic loses. And I didn't panic. The air around me was dry. Dust clung to my skin. Someone was arguing over the radio, something about rations. But I was miles away, already tracing her steps in my mind. She thought this was the end of my story, but it was just the beginning. So if you're wondering how a woman can disappear with your kids and your life savings while you're fighting for your country, and what mistake she made that led to everything unraveling, stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't a revenge story. It's a reconstruction. It's a strategy. And in the end, it's justice without a single raised voice. We met in the most ordinary way, at a gas station just off Route 12. I was heading to base after a long weekend home. She was buying coffee and laughing at the pump not taking her card. I remember how casually she asked if I believed in fate. I didn't, but I liked the way she made the question sound like a dare. Her name was Megan. She was sharp, funny, with this kind of fire behind her eyes that made the world seem less predictable. We moved fast. Military life does that to you. You don't get to test the waters, you jump or you don't. We jumped. The first 2 years were golden. We bought a modest house near Wilmington. Nothing fancy, just big enough for a future. And then we had the twins. I had this idea in my head that if I just worked hard enough, loved strong enough, and stayed loyal, everything else would hold. But life doesn't work like that. People fray, even when you don't see it happening. Looking back, I should have noticed the early signs. She started locking her phone. That was new. She took weekend trips to see her sister, but the stories felt practiced. She opened a small business, a boutique that never seemed to make real sales, but always had new stock. I offered help with the books once. She laughed it off, said I'd just mess it up with military spreadsheets. I told myself not to push. She was raising our kids while I was gone. She deserved freedom, space, trust, and so I gave it. But I kept quiet tabs, not because I suspected betrayal, but because I'd been trained to detect inconsistencies. That training never shuts off. Even at home, I noticed how our joint account started fluctuating in strange ways. Large ATM withdrawals, in towns we didn't live in, receipts she never mentioned, purchases that didn't fit. When I asked, she always had a smile. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a mistake. Bank error. I'll fix it." She never did. And then there were the silences, long ones. She used to wait for my calls. Toward the end, she barely answered. I once came home on short leave. She didn't meet me at the airport. Said the kids were sick, but when I got home, they were at a neighbor's perfectly fine. Still, I didn't fight. I started preparing, quietly. I scanned and saved every legal document I could find. Opened a separate savings account under a different branch, using a military ID-only access feature she didn't know existed. I began storing hard copies of birth certificates, passports, even medical records, all in a lockbox in my storage unit, under an old engine tarp. She laughed once and said I was too organized for my own good. She had no idea. I wasn't collecting for divorce. I was collecting in case of disaster, because something in her eyes had changed. She still smiled, but the warmth was gone, like someone else had moved into her body and learned her lines. She stopped saying, "I miss you," on our calls. Eventually, she stopped calling at all. It was always me dialing. Me. Always her distracted voice on the other end, like she was whispering from another life. At first, I thought she was tired. Later, I knew better. When I looked back through our cloud photo account, entire months were missing. Photos I remembered, taking of the kids, were gone, deleted one by one. She was rewriting our digital history, erasing evidence of our shared life. One night I logged into the home security cameras remotely. I had set them up for safety. She had disabled 3 of them. The front door still worked, though, and I saw a man I didn't recognize drop off. A package. She kissed him on the porch. She thought I wasn't watching. I didn't confront her, didn't send a message, didn't even breathe differently. Instead, I called my old friend Tom, a civilian intelligence analyst now working private. We'd served together back in Afghanistan. I told him, "I just want to know what's mine and what's being moved." Within a week, he sent me a document trail. The boutique, it was fake. A shell company with a registered P.O. box and a routing system designed to move money through 3 states. And guess whose name was on the forms? Mine. She had forged my signature. On business filings, on real estate forms, even on a power of attorney document I never signed. That was the moment the betrayal turned into a crime. She wasn't just falling out of love. She was building a life and erasing me from it. I returned, early from my next tour without telling her, landed in civilian clothes, waited outside the daycare. She never showed. Later that night, the house was empty, furniture gone, closets stripped, kids' drawings torn from the fridge like they'd never existed. She had vanished. I stood in the living room, echo bouncing off the bare walls. And then I saw it, on the floor next to the front door, and a post-it note. It wasn't for me, it was for whoever came next. Unit ready for listing. Lockbox code 7389. That was it. She had sold the house. I checked the account. 0 balance, everything. Gone. And then my phone lit up. One message, no name, just a number I didn't recognize. "You'll never find us." I exhaled. Not in pain, in clarity. She thought this was checkmate, but I had already seen the board from above. I knew where my original documents were. I knew every form she forged, and I knew what mistakes she had made, because for all her planning, she didn't know what I kept hidden. Not in the bank, not in the cloud, but in memory. This wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Because this wasn't just abandonment. It was layered, legal, financial, digital, and I wasn't going to stumble through it with panic. I needed precision. So I did what I was trained to do. I made a mission file. I labeled it Operation Glass because glass breaks. But when you look through it long enough, you see everything. I started with timestamps, phone records, security logs, cloud backups. I requested full download history from our joint cloud account, recovered deleted files, traced edits. She hadn't been careful. She thought deleting photos meant they were gone forever. She didn't know about shadow logs. I used an old laptop from my pre-deployment days, never connected to our shared network. It still had old scans of our property titles, and the original deed didn't match the one filed 6 weeks before she vanished. She had forged my signature, badly, but enough to fool a lazy notary. Then came the emails. She never changed her Apple ID, so every message from her boutique's inbox synced automatically when I accessed the backup. I read everything: invoices, transfer receipts, conversations with someone signed only as M. That's how I found the link to a man named Marcus Lyle, convicted twice, fraud and wire transfer manipulation. Now he was listed as creative partner on her fake business. That was the moment I knew this wasn't emotional. This was organized, so I got organized too. I rented a P.O. box under a different name, bought a prepaid phone, activated secure encrypted cloud storage. Every document I uncovered, every screenshot, every audio snippet, I backed it up 3 times. I called Tom again. "I need a clean digital trail," I said. He laughed. "You think I haven't been prepping since that kiss on the porch?" He helped me trace IP addresses from her last known locations, and then we got lucky. She used her phone to access a public Wi-Fi at a motel 2 states away. That login triggered a location ping. We had a zone, not an address, but close enough to start triangulating. I reached out to a family lawyer, discreetly. No official case filing, just a consultation. I laid everything on the table: forged documents, movement of funds, proof of custody interference. She looked at me and said, "You know you could bury her with this, right?" I shook my head. "I don't want her buried. I want the truth surfaced." Then I did the one thing she never expected. I filed a petition for asset protection and emergency custody, citing proof of fraud and risk to the minors. Not a custody battle, not a lawsuit, a strategic claim. And it triggered a response, because once you enter that kind of motion into the system, a digital alert gets sent to all connected accounts. 2 hours later, I got a hit. She logged into our old bank account, the one she had cleaned out, from a city 3 states over. Mistake, because that IP was registered, logged, and now traceable. I marked the location, flagged it, backed it up. Then I leaned back in my chair, hands still, eyes on the map, and I waited. She was on the move, but so was I. The map lit up like a battlefield. Her digital trail was sloppy. She had underestimated what someone trained in recon and logistics could do with a few breadcrumbs. I tracked the IP to a rental cabin outside Asheville. Private listing, no cameras. But she made one crucial mistake. She paid the security deposit using a business account linked to her fake boutique, and I had full access to that account. I didn't go there. I didn't storm in like some jealous ex-husband looking for a scene. I waited. Instead, I sent a subpoena request through my lawyer to freeze any assets related to that business, including the account that paid for the rental. I wasn't trying to trap her. I was trying to document her. Legally, the judge approved it. That meant anyone trying to withdraw funds would trigger a legal flag. I had just set a tripwire. Meanwhile, I went deeper. I contacted the notary listed on the forged house sale. Asked a few simple questions. Did they witness both parties signing in person? What forms of ID were shown? They got nervous. 3 days later, they emailed me a revised affidavit. They admitted they never saw me, that Megan brought in a man pretending to be me wearing a hat and sunglasses. The entire thing was fraudulent. Now I had bank fraud, identity fraud, and forged legal documents on record. I still hadn't called her. Still hadn't told anyone in my family what was happening. The silence was strategic, because now the courts had something they couldn't ignore. I filed for temporary sole custody, attaching every single piece of evidence. And then I waited again. That's when the email came. It wasn't from her. It was from a private mediator, offering discreet negotiation options to avoid public proceedings. She was scared enough to hide, but not careful enough to cover her tracks. I replied with one line, "I'll negotiate when I see my children." 3 hours later, her lawyer called mine. She agreed to a supervised video call, and that's when I saw them, my kids, on a couch that didn't belong to us, in a room I had never seen. They looked confused, not scared, but different. "Hey," I said quietly. My son squinted at the camera. "Dad?" That was all I needed. The call lasted 6 minutes. No talk of the situation. Just voices, smiles, proof of life. But it shifted everything, because now, in the eyes of the court, she had acknowledged she was in possession of the children, and had left the state without my knowledge or consent. And that's parental abduction. I handed everything to a federal family enforcement officer. Cross-state custody violations are serious, especially when tied to fraud. Still, I wasn't celebrating, because this wasn't a game. These were my kids, my life. I spent years protecting people from war zones. Now I had to protect them from what their mother had become. She thought she had erased me, but what she didn't realize is that I never left the board, and the next move wasn't hers. It was mine. The day the warrant was issued, I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I was in the courthouse hallway watching my lawyer explain to the clerk why we needed immediate enforcement of interstate custody retrieval. 2 states, 3 forged contracts, 1 financial accomplice with a record, and now to a federal case. I was never interested in revenge, but when betrayal crosses into felony, you don't respond with emotions. You respond with precision. The investigator, assigned to the case, moved fast. She'd seen this before, parental abduction wrapped in financial fraud. But even she admitted, this one's different, it's methodical. That was a compliment and a warning. I gave her the entire file, every document, every login trace, the notarized confession from the house transfer, the boutique's financial trail linking to Marcus Lyle, a man already under investigation in another state for money laundering through fake LLCs. Suddenly, this wasn't just about my wife. It was part of something bigger. The FBI got involved. Quietly. They didn't knock on her door. They waited. Watched. She and Marcus had registered a new LLC 2 months prior. Same structure, different name. The plan was to use that business as a front to secure a government loan, using forged data and a fake employee list. But she had used our children's names on the documents, and that crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I was asked to step back, to let the process work. No contact, no interference. So I did what I'd always done, I observed. 3 weeks later, the arrest was made. Not dramatic, not in the middle of the night, just 2 agents calmly walking into a co-working space in Tennessee, asking for Megan Riley. She looked surprised, then resigned. Marcus tried to run. Didn't get far. They were both taken in for questioning under suspicion of federal fraud, wire tampering, and child endangerment. I didn't see it happen. Didn't want to. But I got the call that same afternoon. "Sir, we've located your children. They're safe. They'll be transferred to your care under emergency supervision within 48 hours. I didn't speak for a moment, then I asked, "Did they ask about me?" The agent paused. "They asked if you were real." I hung up, sat still. No tears, no shaking, just one quiet breath. She had tried to erase me, to replace our history, with a forged one. But she made the same mistake every fraudster makes. She thought truth could be deleted. It can't. It leaves shadows. And if you know where to look, shadows point to everything. 2 days later, I met my children at a neutral care center. They ran into the room like they had been waiting their whole lives. My daughter clung to my neck. My son just stared at me for a few seconds before whispering, "You didn't forget." Us, I hadn't. What I didn't tell them was that while I was tracing digital footprints, they were being moved between short-term rentals, told to use fake names at schools, coached to say I had disappeared. The system saw through it. Thanks to the evidence I'd gathered and the confession from the notary, the court ruled quickly and decisively. Full custody awarded. All financial ties frozen. Fraud charges elevated. She pled not guilty. Of course she did, but Marcus didn't. He flipped. Gave the FBI everything, emails, conversations, receipts, even screenshots of chats where Megan discussed the timeline for cutting ties cleanly before he returns. Her words, not mine. Her defense tried to argue emotional instability, stress, anxiety, trauma. The court wasn't moved. They saw the documents. They saw the children's testimony. They saw the planning. And they saw me, calm, composed, never retaliatory. That mattered, because the world's used to stories like mine ending with anger. But I chose something else. Justice isn't loud. It's consistent. The final court hearing was swift. The judge didn't even look at her when he read the sentence. 18 months, suspended sentence, mandatory restitution, and psychological supervision. But the real verdict came in the form of silence. No one in the room said her name again. As for Marcus, he was sentenced separately. Money trails sealed his fate. He'll serve real time. I watched it all from the back of the courtroom. Never spoke, never flinched. She turned once, just before leaving, in cuffs. I don't know what she was looking for. Forgiveness, maybe, or confirmation that I still saw her. I didn't give her either, because the man she tried to erase wasn't standing in that room anymore. He was already gone, rebuilt somewhere else. Brick by brick. This wasn't revenge, this wasn't punishment. It was simply the truth, brought into light, calmly, relentlessly. And as I walked out of that building, hand in hand with my kids, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I just felt free. We moved to a town where nobody knew my name, that was the point. A cabin just off the tree line, 2 bedrooms, a workshop in the back. It wasn't much, but it was ours. And for the first time in years, nothing was missing. The kids adjusted. Faster than I did. They loved the quiet, the creek behind the house. The dog we rescued from the shelter, named him Chief. He follows my son like a shadow. I started fixing things. Old chairs, broken clocks, a grandfather cabinet someone left out for trash. People in the town began to notice. They'd drop off, pieces on my porch with notes like, "If it's worth saving." And that became the rhythm of our lives, finding what was broken and giving it back better than it was. No one asked what I'd been through, and I never volunteered it. Because the past didn't need retelling. It had already done its damage. And in some strange way, it had also given me clarity. My daughter started drawing again. My son helps me sand the wood, wearing goggles 3 sizes too big. We don't talk about her, not out of pain, but out of peace. The legal processes still echo now and then. A letter here, a form there. But it doesn't matter anymore. The storm passed, the wreckage settled, and what we rebuilt is stronger than what we lost. Some nights I sit on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sky change color. There's no noise, no alerts, no strategies to run, just silence. But this silence isn't empty. It's earned. It's the kind that follows the end of something hard and the beginning of something honest. I'm not the man she tried to erase. I'm not the soldier they expected to break. I'm just a father, a builder, a survivor. And when people ask how I stayed calm, how I didn't lose control, how I put it all back together, I tell them this. I wasn't the only one they tried to destroy, but I was the one who didn't stay quiet.